Histamine, gut health, and spring pollen. You might blame your allergies, but is your morning smoothie the real one to blame? Hi, my name is Britton and this is That Brainy Bee. I have a background in psychology and biology, meaning that I enjoy learning how our bodies and minds collaborate with the environment around us. When it comes to stress, immunity, and overall health, allergies sit right in the middle of that intersection. So in this video, we're going to get informed about what allergies are and how they appear differently in different people, or the difference of different antigens versus pathogens, and just overall understanding what are allergies and what do they do in our bodies. We'll talk about cross-sensitivities and the importance in herbal medicine. We'll do a brief overview of history, genetics, and the future. And then we'll tie it in with my experience and some recommendations that I've found and some research. So let's first get into what are allergies. Allergies are essentially our immune system kind of overreacting to a harmless substance. Symptoms may include rash, you might have itchy eyes, very severe symptoms such as you might go into anaphylactic shock. You have stomach cramps. There is a connection between allergies and digestion, and it gets pretty complex when we realize all of these connections because, I mean, aren't those symptoms the same symptoms associated with a cold and strep even sometimes? Like, how do you decipher if you're actually having allergies or if you're sick? We're not going to answer that question right away, but at the end of this video, I'm hoping that you can kind of separate the understanding of sensitivities and allergies and the relation of that, and also actual allergies and allergens, and how does it all connect in your body. The immune system is a very complex network, and there's so many different molecules, and each molecule has a very specific job that it does, and of course we have genetics to consider and our predisposed risk factors, and so all of that plays in on how our immune system responds to these substances in our environment. Not only is it molecules, but there's cells such as T cells, B cells. These are kind of our warriors and protectors in our immune systems. And you might know or have heard of the relation of T cells in situations like cancer. There is a connection with that. We're not going to go into the diagnostics and what all connects to it, but we're just talking about in the body. So it can get really confusing when we're talking about molecules and atoms, pathogens, antigens. So let's just break it all apart, and we're going to start with pathogens and antigens because I think that's a good baseline to start at. Cells and tissues and organs are working so hard to protect us, and that's all within the immune system. So we have those B cells, like I said, they create a protective protein that binds to pathogens and neutralizes them. So what is a pathogen? It's something that's disease causing. It can cause an infection and it multiplies and causes diseases. So examples would be bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, toxins. All of those are considered pathogens. Well, there's a little bit of overlap with antigens. What are antigens? So antigens actually kind of piggyback on top of the pathogens and enter in the body. And the antigens are essentially that secret code that talks to our body to say how to respond to those pathogens. In simplest form, to further break that down, essentially the immune system overreacts and then it produces IgE antibodies, and those bind to mast cells and other immune cells. Now allergens bind to these cells and then they release chemicals such as histamine, which we have probably heard of antihistamines in relation to the allergy symptoms. So histamine is a small organic molecule, amine specifically, that is derived from amino acid histidine. So amine is an organic compound based on the structure of ammonia. So we actually kind of naturally have ammonia within our bodies. We're not going to get into that. Let's just focus on histamines. Well, histamine itself isn't going to cause allergy symptoms. What causes the allergy symptoms? So mast cells release an inflammatory chemical mediator to cause atopic symptoms. So atopic just means a tendency to develop allergic reactions. So atopic diseases or atopic ailments would be like asthma, allergies, eczema, and it can be because of a genetic predisposition to it. One parent has asthma, for example, then you're 30 to 50% more at risk than if both parents have it, then you're 60 to 80% at risk. And we're gonna get more into that when we talk about the genetics, but let's go back to histamines, and then let's go back again to antigens and pathogens. So obviously we know histamine is going to trigger an inflammatory response. So that just means that things are inflamed. Things are inflamed and they are angry. It stimulates stomach acid. If histamine stimulates stomach acid, then we know that there's some kind of connection there. It influences alertness, attention, and our sleep-wake cycle. So if you have allergies, it's not only affecting your breathing and maybe your digestion, it's also affecting your sleep. And we know how important all of those things are for mediating stress. It's a vasodilator. So histamine widens blood vessels. Histamine is a big boy, all right? And then we have medications that we're going to talk about, but let's first go back to antigens and pathogens. As I said, antigens are kind of like that piggyback that rides on a pathogen to get red coded, decoded, I guess, by our immune system. To further specify that, antigens are specific molecules that trigger our immune response. So these are molecules that are often proteins or carbs. The pathogens are whole organisms or substances that cause disease. So, and as I said, there's a little bit of an overlap there, but the key differences here are antigens are found on the surface of a pathogen. Pathogens enter, and then the antigen, as I said, is decoded by the immune system, which then produces antibodies. So the immune system actually, and this is something that where my background of psychology can get involved, the immune system remembers. It remembers and it kind of codes that so that the next time you have that disease, it can better respond to it and better protect you from it. This is where the interesting study of immunological memory comes in. But let's look at a quick example of these antigens and pathogens. So let's take strep, for example. Strep antigens are found on the surface of Streptococcus bacteria. Specifically, we're going to talk about group A strep or Streptococcus pyogenes. Themselves are the disease-causing pathogens, whereas the key antigens like T proteins, R proteins, M protein, these are all the antigens that are going to be piggybacking on for the immunological response to key in on that, code it, do whatever it needs to do with it so that we are better protected in the future. Cool, so we kind of understand how allergies work and how the body responds to it with the immune system. So what kind of allergies are there? Because there's lots of different shapes and sizes. There is obviously food allergies. There's antibody-mediated food allergies. So this would be like if you're allergic to milk, if you're allergic to peanuts, that kind of thing. Or even exercise-associated food allergies. There's cell-mediated food allergies, so like celiac is going to be under this category. Another antibody or cell-mediated would be cases of gastroenteritis. Then of course, so there's allergies, and then we just have intolerances. Some people are more sensitive to certain groups or families of food, and then that's where cross-reactivity comes in. So you might have, you're sensitive to lactose, you're sensitive to dairy, or maybe you're actually sensitive to the phenolic compounds of a spice that's found in that food, not dairy, obviously. Some people have sulfite-induced asthma, so eating certain foods actually causes them to have asthma. So say you're very sensitive to turmeric. Well, if you're sensitive to turmeric, or say you're allergic to turmeric, you're gonna wanna look at that family, and you're gonna wanna look at the other, like maybe it's because of the phenolic compounds. So that's why like certain people, those who deal with celiac need to be so careful when going out to eat, because there is cross-contamination. And when you're in a restaurant, one, you can't necessarily watch and see what they're all doing, and two, a lot of the times there's this discomfort associated with, you know, having to kind of demand how your food is made, and I totally understand that there's anxiety behind it, so that doesn't make it fun. So let's talk about the genetics and the history of of allergies. If you're questioning you have allergies, how do you figure out what kind you have, and how do we just in general go about the diagnostics of allergies? There is a not clear history on where allergies come from and how we've handled them in the past and historical times, but there is note. So in the Ebers Papyrus, there is mentions of skin conditions which could be associated with allergy responses, skin inflammations, that kind of thing. Then in the Bible as well, there's lots of notes of skin conditions within Leviticus. There's lots of boils that are specified, and those could have to do with allergies as well. But where we really start to see the clear note of allergies, surprisingly, is actually I mean, this is a long time ago, but only in 1819 when John Bostock noted a case of hay fever. And then Charles Blackley later on, I believe, what was it, 40, 50 years, maybe a little longer. We don't really have a clear history of where it came from with other ailments and issues, like, for example, lactose intolerance. This is an allergy. We have an idea of where it came from, but we don't necessarily know. There's no like record account of the first case of an allergy. We can only kind of look at signs, and we can look at possible predispositions. So let's talk about the potential research and the future of allergies. Since we don't really know about the past, what we can do is we can kind of look at ourselves, and what has been really promising in the study and realm of allergies is genetics, and looking at these different gene mutations, and looking at correlations. And of course we know correlation doesn't equal causation, but looking at correlations between different gene mutations and these different allergies. So for the example I was just about to say is lactose intolerance. So I was doing a really deep dive into like the history of like German traditions, the history of Germans, and just my family lineage, and I ended up looking up the Baltic tribe and the Caspian Sea, and just the origins of the Caspian Sea, and I found some notes, and again, correlation does not equal causation, I want to make that clear, but I found some notes and some interesting research going into how possibly lactose intolerance came from the Baltic tribe or Lithuania culture, and how that there might be a gene or a genetic mutation associated with those cultures in correlation to the lactose intolerance that we see so commonly today. Obviously that's not, again, correlation doesn't equal causation. I'm going to keep saying that because I don't want anybody to take this and run with it, but it's just interesting to see these connections being made, and there's a lot of research going into allergies, obviously, because so many people deal with allergies. If you're interested in looking into the genetic research, obviously I'll list it below on what I personally researched for this video. So the genetic ETSI, and then interleukin-4, and then filigrin. Those are some of the main ones that I saw associated with research in allergies, if you're interested. And then another category that I found really interesting is the epithelial barrier, and how that has some kind of relation to allergies too. So there's a really interesting hypothesis about the epithelial barrier, and how encoding of the epithelial cell-derived cytokines, how that relates. If you have like a weakened epithelial barrier, which that's the first layer of protection for your allergies, epithelial barrier dysfunction, I believe is what it's called, that can have some direct correlations with allergies. Let's talk about the application. Obviously, I said that I deal with some severe seasonal rhinitis. So around this time of year when spring is coming upon us, and the beautiful trees are budding, and there's some maybe plants coming up from the ground, that's when I'm struggling to breathe the most. And then I also am lactose intolerant. So I have an intolerance to certain dairy. Just kind of interesting to think about that and go through all of these considerations. Lots of hypotheses. Of course, we don't have all of the answers, but there's lots of research going into our allergies and how to help us today. Let's get into some of the remedies and relief that I found. And again, I just want to state I'm not a medical professional. There's skin rash. If you're having a skin rash due to allergies, first of all, look at your ingredients, look at your soaps, try and maybe use less soap. I know that sounds weird in this day and age, but our soaps actually are affecting our immune system's ability to protect us. So if you're just constantly using antimicrobial soaps and just constantly washing and washing and washing, you're getting rid of that protection. You're getting rid of all of the bacteria, good and bad. And then also beware of mislabeling. So kind of relevant to what we were talking about before, dry and cracked skin can be a direct entrance to infection. So if you are using your hands a lot, if you're working with patients, and this is why we wear gloves and stuff, because if we have cuts, we know that that's an invitation for bad bacteria to get in, and it's getting right past that epithelial barrier. It can get right into your bloodstream. And your nails too, fragrance, makeup, and hair. Obviously you want to avoid using too much fragrance. Hairsprays, I'm somebody that's really sensitive to like antiperspirant sprays. Just in general, you kind of just test and refine what works for you. If you're dealing with a skin rash, I would really explore that underlying issue, or really kind of identify what's causing the dry skin or the skin rash. If you're dealing with itchiness, there's a few things you can try for relief, and I'm not saying that these are researched. I talk about research separately. So these are just things to try for relief. Obviously look up contraindications, look up safety, and all of that kind of stuff. In Chinese medicine, drinking oolong tea is said to be helpful for your skin itchiness. Do aloe vera. Aloe vera is also known to be good for itchiness. Using a cold whole milk compress. We know whole milk is really good for the skin, and I do think that whole milk along with oatmeal is so good for eczema and specifically skin reactions and conditions. Witch hazel poultice can also be helpful for any itchiness. Calendula oils. I actually just made a calendula infused oil. Almond oil can also be really helpful for itchiness. Just doing your own exploration, refine, retest, figure out what works for you and your symptoms. Let's get into conventional treatments. So we're gonna go back to histamine and talk about antihistamine. Typically today you will see second generation antihistamines being prescribed, but there's something called first generation and second generation antihistamines. Within the first generation is where you'll find something like Benadryl. Benadryl is a first generation antihistamine, and it is known to possibly cause drowsiness. It's because they cross the blood-brain barrier a lot easier, versus second generation like Allegra, Zyrtec, Claritin, I believe, these don't cross the blood-brain barrier as easily. They don't cause drowsiness as much. There can still be symptoms or side effects such as headaches and that kind of thing, and that's because everybody is different. Those are the typical conventional treatments for allergies. There's lots of remedies you can try to find some relief as well that I'm just gonna mention and go through. For hay fever or for cold, stuffiness in general, a folk remedy, and this is not very researched, I wouldn't say, but I would say it probably works, is taking a tablespoon of horseradish with honey. And then another kind of folk remedy would be taking honey or taking bee pollen. Some people say this is kind of like taking a vaccine for your allergies, especially if you deal with seasonal allergies. It's kind of like taking a vaccine for that, because you're exposing yourself to what's causing that. It's weird. Honey is a big one. Honey is one to highlight. Stinging nettle as a tea or a tincture. Stinging nettle is another one to highlight. I cross-referenced it in multiple books. I read, I think, 6 books in total for this. Well, not entirely. I didn't read 6 total books because the books I'm talking about referencing are very large, but I read 6 medical remedy books different years, different techniques, different cultures. Vitamin C, or just eating an orange, eating citrus. Some people use the rinds of citrus and make a soup out of that. You know, that doesn't sound appealing to me personally, but if it's your cup of tea or cup of citrusy soup, then definitely give it a try. Careful on high doses of vitamin C, especially if you're pregnant or hoping to be pregnant. Quercetin, this is a very common one, and you can find it in, I believe, strawberries and certain fruits that it's naturally found in. You can also take a supplement of it. This is one that is definitely researched and referenced in lots of different areas. Sesame oil in the nose, not sure about that. Some people swear by it. Jumping is a really, this has been like secretly prescribed by doctors for years for allergies and just congestion relief. Just jumping gets your drainage going, it gets everything moving and flowing. Sabadilla, that's another one, questionable, not sure. Fiber, getting enough fiber is going to help you. As we know, digestion connects with allergies, so I would assume that if you're helping your body naturally detox and allowing yourself to have good poops with getting enough fiber, that probably is going to help relieve allergy symptoms. Feverfew is another questionable one, not really researched, or I didn't see lots of research on it personally. Fasting and detoxing, again, I think that you really need to understand what allergies you have and where they stem from before you try and just detox your allergies away, because I mean, just detoxing in general, we have to be really cautious about. So let's get into the Ayurvedic kind of methods. Now I might repeat some, but in Ayurveda, svasa is what allergies are known as, and it's mainly a kapha disorder that might also have some vata sneak in. Pitta may spark inflammation, so it's just said in Ayurveda, you want to avoid cold foods and drinks, sweets, dairy, refined carbs, processed foods, don't overeat, don't eat too late, and don't day sleep. One of the reliefs is syrup and honey, so they will make maybe a syrup. I think I have a recipe for a syrup. So let's bring it all together with our botanical suggestions, which is what I'm going to be more well versed in because that's what I'm researching right now. Fresh nettle extract. This, again, I know that nettle is super good for just in general the immune system. It's so good for inflammation. Nettle is also helpful for rheumatoid arthritis. Utilize bitters. I would see this being more common in like Ayurvedic medicine, being that you're trying to avoid eating those cold kind of slimy foods. You might be more prone to having a bitter or having something more spicy. Psyllium husk powder as well, some people will utilize that. In general, in all of these treatments, what they're trying to achieve is you're stabilizing mast cells, you're improving your mucous membrane integrity, you're just improving the integrity of gut and intestinal mucosa. You want to enhance your adrenal response toward the activation of the inflammation pathways. You really want to protect your liver and improve the ability of the liver to clear and detox allergens, and then just supporting the immune system. So all of these therapeutics, all of these reliefs, they are just to help support your body in that response and reaction that it's dealing with. So I would say if you are somebody that is curious and maybe questioning your allergies and just wanting to explore them more, the two questions to start out with are, one, you deal with allergens from something outside, or is it something you more notice when you're indoors? I think that's a really good discrepancy. No, it doesn't necessarily say if they're seasonal or food. You can also have like pet dander and dust mites indoors versus, and then sometimes you might eat outdoors versus indoors. Obviously there's some maybe overlap there, but just considering like where do you experience these symptoms the most that might be associated with histamine, and then just asking yourself, how often do you have these symptoms? Are they seasonal, where you only notice it at this time of year, notice it all year long and it just never really goes away? So those are the two main questions to really ask yourself and consider what kind of allergies you're dealing with, and kind of go through exploration, because it's really difficult. I would highly recommend going to a professional and getting diagnosed, or just double checking what you're dealing with if you are confident you're dealing with allergies. You could go to a functional medicine practitioner if you feel more comfortable with that. But if you're doing your own exploration, just ask your family. Start with your family, immediate family, go on from there. Maybe ask for some medical documents. You can figure a lot out about your health from your medical records and from your family medical records, and just in general genetics. I mean, that's how I figured out about the Baltic tribe and the associations of the gene mutations, and it's just interesting. It is unfortunate that we don't have all of the answers about allergies. I hope that you can leave this video with a better education about allergies, you have a better understanding of what you might be dealing with, and just remember that it wasn't until 2004 that the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act listed the 8 most common allergies. So if you feel like you're not really represented in the community well, there is definitely a possibility in the future. Slowly and surely, the FDA is becoming more involved with our foods and kind of protecting, reviewing chemicals, and reviewing the makeup of the food, and just overviewing like allergies, labeling. Yes, we have to know that there's gonna be error in labeling, and there's gonna be mistakes made, because we're all humans and there is not a perfect answer for one person. It's just something to be educated about, and if you're, whether you're interested in it for your own health, maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're a caretaker, maybe you're a mom, or maybe you're a business owner, restaurant owner, any of those, it can be really handy to know what you're dealing with allergies and how to improve it. And also, I mean, if you're a business owner, it can be really helpful to know what time of the year are people more susceptible to dealing with allergies. It's just something you can think about. Having a little training for your workers to help them prepare. Make a pre-season plan with your workers of, hey, if you have allergies, how are you going to help that? And maybe you have some good references to guide them to. So now you know what allergies are and how they look different in different people. You know different kinds of allergies and different allergy relief, and we also looked at the genetic predispositions that can affect our reactions. We looked at the blood-brain barrier, and we looked at different medications and how they can affect us differently as well, and we looked at some conventional and botanical treatments. So now you should have a pretty good understanding of allergies and be able to maybe advocate for yourself better and maybe understand your body better. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a comment and like this video to let me know. Don't forget that you are loved, and peace out.